like to introduce Barak Lurie, who is on our board. He's an attorney. He's a radio show host at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sundays. And you are also on the PragerU board and various other boards, and part of the fight that PragerU is waging against what Google has been doing, which is incredibly important. You can Google about about that. You can find our YouTube videos about it, but really, it's such an important existential war, so thank you for fighting that. So today we're here talking about, I hope you all can see me, and I will try to project, Atheism Kills. It's a terrific book. It's such a critical subject, and it's incredibly well researched, well thought out. The issue is looked at from a number of viewpoints that I've read a fair amount on this subject that are new to me. It's funny in places. It's very easy to read. It's sort of conversational and colloquial. You find yourself going, oh yeah, that it really sounds just like having a conversation with Barak, and it's outstanding. It's a real delight. It's really entertaining. I wanted to start with your journey writing the book, From Atheist to Devoutly Religious. I heard you talking to Dennis Prager about this, and it's quite something. As an atheist, you had set out to prove in your senior thesis that you were right. Anybody who foolishly believed in anything was wrong, and yet a funny thing happened.
So let me start off with a little bit of a cute joke, if I could, because it actually relates to your question. So it turns out that in the winter of 1943, the Allies had really fantastic evidence that Hitler and a lot of his other henchmen were going to be going and proceeding with the convoy down this valley. And they all knew that he was going to be there. They had really credible evidence. So of course they prepared. They were going to kill Hitler and all his henchmen, and that would be the end of World War II. And so they got all their snipers ready. They got all these men ready with camouflage. They were super duper. And he was going to be passing through this valley at precisely 11:42 p.m. Okay? So they waited and waited, and they were prepared. They were there hours before. And then it was 11:30. Okay, 12 minutes to go. 11:40, 2 more minutes. Here comes the great moment. The war is going to end. And they're going to blow him out, smithereens, you name it. There won't be even a trace of him left. So 11:39. 11:40, the big moment. No Hitler. Quiet. Okay. 11:42. No Hitler. 11:50. No Hitler. Midnight. No Hitler. 12:30, 12:45. Finally, at 1 o'clock, one of the snipers turns to the other and he says, "My goodness, I hope nothing happened to Hitler." So. I like that because it illustrates a major point that this book is all about, which is the end of distinctions. And the distinctions of how we forget what our main mission is, right? We forget why we are where we are today. Why are we on this planet, right? I mean, it's the ultimate question, I suppose, but we should all be asking that. Is it for the purpose of getting a lot more money, a lot more toys, all the sex that you can want? Sorry, Sasha. Sorry, Max. All right. Is that what it's all about? Right? Are we just here to breathe and eat and mate and avoid problems? Is that it? We have to remember our mission. That, dovetailing to your question now, really started making me think a little bit more as I was writing my thesis. My thesis at Stanford was a very narrow topic, mind you. I mean, very, very narrow. Does religion cause more deaths and evil than the absence of religion? Right? Narrow topic. Narrow. So I set out about to prove that because I had heard that mantra, and I'm sure it was right. And then as I went along, I realized, doing a lot of research, that I was just wildly off. I was so wrong. And then, in the meantime, I'd been dealing with a lot of Christian friends on campus. I was not one of these guys, these atheists that would mock Christians, but I just wanted to understand why they thought so foolishly. How can they think this way? But they were so engaging. They were always very polite. And they always said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I didn't like that, right? It just put little seeds in my head. And next thing I know, I'm beginning to think like them. So, so the question of free will came up. And I started reading Dostoevsky, and I realized you can't have free will without God. It's just not possible. And if you don't believe in free will, then you believe in a world of determinism. Everyone know what determinism is? Okay, determinism means that you have no free will. Nothing is of your own volition. Everything you do this moment is a product of something nuanced from your past. Think of yourself as a billiard ball on a pool table, right? And the reason why this ball is here is, well, because a bunch of random connections that happened from previous pool shots. That's what life is in a deterministic world. So I didn't buy that. And I knew that free will came from somewhere. And I concluded that it had to come from God. And that opened the door for me. And then I came out to my Christian friends and I said, I guess I believe in God. But it opened it up. And it was such a delight. And contrary to my initial impression, I thought I would be suppressing my mind, when in fact I was expanding my mind. And boy, has it ever expanded since. And it's been such a delight. It took 9 years to write this book. And it's a book of passion. And I never thought this entire time that I was saying something new. But apparently I am. And most people, when you ask them, even religious people, if you ask them, do you believe that religion has caused more deaths than anything else? Many people will kind of nod along. Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah, what a bummer, right? But that's like, I mean, if you're a doctor, right? Any doctors here? Okay, one doctor, right? Okay, so you're a doctor, and if you were to learn that medicine has caused more deaths, more anguish, more pain than no medicine whatsoever, would you join this horrible profession? Of course not, right? At the very least, you would say, I ain't doing nothing. So why would you, as a religious person, involve yourself in such a horrific institution, such as Catholicism, Protestantism, Judaism, whatever, if it's going to do such horrific things? So I set about to prove this issue. And it's the first major chapter in the book. It's called Murder by Numbers. And it goes through the litany of all the killings that happened through the godless regimes and those that are not. Anyway, that was my turnabout, and I began to realize that, and my whole focus was not just that I believed in God, which I do fiercely, but I saw the dangers of a world without God.
I want to come back to that first chapter, but first, I'd heard Avi Davis had a role in your starting to write the book.
Yes.
Who was the former president of AFA, the late president of AFA.
Yeah.
What role did he play? I'm curious about that.
Well, I'm just going to keep on standing up. All right.
Yeah, just feed
All right.
question.
Okay, so Avi Davis was kind enough to, I think he ran out of people to ask to be honorees in 2009, and he just kind of looked around and like, well, you want to be an honoree? And I said, sure. So, and I'll never forget, I forget who the gentleman was who was the MC that evening, and you're supposed to, Evan knows this, right? And it wasn't you. No, it wasn't. No, I know, because he was a black gentleman, and I do not think you're black.
That was me.
Okay. So anyway, it was not Evan. I love Evan Sayed, by the way. Great writer, great friend. Anyway, so I'm supposed to give my background to him ahead of time so that he can read and say, okay, Barak Lurie, he published this, he published that, he's the head of this. And I gave him my basic background, and he looked at it, and I'm just about to go up to my microphone, and he looks at me, and he goes, is this all? I'm like, is that not good enough? And he goes, well, you can jazz it up a little bit. And I said, no, this is who I am. So I told, he introduced me. It was not a very impressive background, but he started talking about, well, I was invited to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. And I found myself talking about this passion about the dangers of atheism. And I noticed how people looked at me, they were interested, but they had no idea that godlessness created so much more violence and death and mayhem and rape and brutality than anything else. It just didn't dawn on them. And I found myself announcing at that speech, and I'm writing a book on that. I wasn't writing a book on it. And now this is 9 years ago, and I said, you'll see it out in 4 months. Okay. So
and
anyway,
here we are.
And here we are, 4 months later. Anyway.
It's an epic. Wonderful. Well, so glad you did, and so glad somehow AFA had a hand in that.
Sure did.
The title is clearly provocative. What responses have you gotten? I can share with you some that I've gotten, but I'm sure you've gotten some great ones
Right.
too.
My favorite one, and a lot of them are on Facebook, but also on the reviews on Amazon. Definitely check them out. My favorite one is that Barak Lurie's Atheism Kills is the most despicable book written since Mein Kampf. I really like that. I mean, that was cool.
Wow.
So,
Wow. That's perfect.
and he wrote a whole article about it. He's, you know.
Yeah, well, they do. I'm going to jump in. You start with the comparison of atheist regimes' record of slaughter versus religious ones. So you had mentioned this already. And what you find is not the conventional wisdom. So take us through what all those are, what you found on both sides.
You mean just the comparison of the numbers?
Yeah, the numbers.
Right. Well, okay,
Staggering.
so when people, I know we have a receptive audience here that understands about faith, but, okay. Somebody answer here how long the Salem witch trials lasted. What's your impression? Is it more than 5 years? More than 10 years? How long did the Salem, who thinks it lasted more than five years? Raise your hand.
Very short. 6 months.
Okay.
Days?
Okay. Who said 6 months? Okay. Close. 4 months. Okay. The Salem witch trials, those horrible witch trials that are an indictment of all Christianity, lasted 4 months. Okay, now for extra credit. How many people died as a result of the Salem witch trials?
27.
Close. In between 3 and 27.
I was going to say 1.
19. 19 people, okay? But don't you worry, the atheist will echo that and inflate that number wildly, as he does with the Inquisition, as he does with the Crusades. I need not explain to this crowd that neither of those things were actually pushed and promoted by the church, right? These are renegades that were doing horrible things. That doesn't mean it's an indictment on the church itself, right? So, but don't you worry, they'll find a way to indict the church, right? So, and how many, you might know this answer a little bit. How many people died during the Crusades? And the Crusades, we're talking about a 300-year period, by the way. Okay? A total, and this includes all the soldiers who died, all the people who died as a result of disease or otherwise, and frankly, I think just about everyone who died, period, who was living around that time. About 1 million people, 300 years. Okay. Now to the Inquisition. How many people died in the Inquisition? We're talking about a period of about 200 to 300 years as well. How many people died? Total?
50,000.
5,000. Off by 10, factor of 10. Okay, so, and again, not an order from the Pope. Okay, just not. So, but to hear from the atheist, this is the indictment they have against you, in addition to a couple of other things, of course. But those are the biggies, the Salem witch trial, the Inquisition, the Crusades. Okay, and then they'll throw in the KKK, because why not? Right? So it's interesting. Never mind that they were, the Christians actually fought against the KKK. Right? What I love the most is that the Christians created the KKK and also they fought the KKK. So that's interesting. The most fascinating part of this is how they can just say this without even worrying about it. And they don't even think about a very simple issue. I'm an attorney. I believe in the statute of limitations. Okay? So breach of contract in California, 4 years. Remember that. If there's nothing you remember from this, a breach of contract in California is 4 years, statute of limitations. All right. Is there a statute of limitations on, even assuming that Christianity as a faith ordered the Inquisition, ordered the Crusades? I mean, what's that Janet Jackson song, right? What have you not done to me lately? Right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. Right? I mean, come on. It's been 500 and 1,000 years, respectively. Yeah. What bad has the church or any Christian faith done lately? Right? But I can tell you what the atheists have done lately, and they're still doing, to the tunes of hundreds of millions of people. It ain't stopping. It's going on. It's growing. And that's the horrors of what we're seeing.
And those are one slaughtering group after another, Mao and Hitler and Stalin and Che and how cool Che is. And there's an ignorance about all of that that's, right? Every school child knows the horrors of the Inquisition and the Salem witch trials, and all they know is Che was cool. Right? And Stalin was, oh, well, not that bad a guy. Okay, we know Hitler was bad, but all the rest, right? They just don't cover this. The ignorance is really kind of astonishing. Then you cite all the various of the world's great accomplishments, some of the finest institutions, as mostly having been born out of religion.
Virtually everything that we value today, everything that we enjoy, can draw its roots to Christianity or Judaism. Not as much Islam, and we can get into that later, but Judaism, Christianity, I mean, it's exquisite what those two religions, those two faiths have given us. The Judeo-Christian mindset has given us justice, given us law and order. It's given us the very notion of freedom itself, the notion of democracy, the notion of not just, humor, that's part of the foundation of God itself, but the hospital system, right? People don't know, but the hospitals were created by the Catholic Church. Okay, as we think of it today. Before it was just doctors and witch doctors. That was about it. I suppose the Salem has to say something about that, right? So they created the university system too. Who knew? Yeah. Right? When we go to the universities today, I went to Stanford. There's no real indicia of a religious faith other than the Memorial Church. But originally, the university was a place where you found God, where you learned so that you could find God even easier. That was the whole role of the university. So, and then likewise with public schools. The way we think of the school system today, Catholic Church, right? The way we think of the charity system today, Catholic Church, right? The Jews as well with the tzedakah. The notion of AA, okay? Created by, that's right, wait for it, the Christian faith, right? Goodwill. Who knew, right? These are phenomenal things that we have to give thanks for our Christian and Jewish friends. We are very lucky that the very foundation of Western civilization owes its thanks to these horrendous institutions, Christianity and Judaism. Okay?
Even science, you mentioned.
Yes,
which is
that's the biggie. That's the ultimate.
Startling, right?
Yeah.
That's, again, completely counter to conventional wisdom.
How many of you think that science and God are never the twain shall meet? They're separate issues, right? A lot of people think that. There's a couple of you raising your hand. And that somehow you can walk and talk at the same time. And, I've got my faith, thank you very much, but I also understand about science. Why do you separate them? They're the same. Of course, I mean, isn't it amazing to you that was the whole purpose of the Catholic Church creating the university, is to show with science how the complexity of God's creation. So, I mean, isn't it amazing what God has done for us with the galaxies? Isn't it amazing what God has given us in every cell in our body? I mean, we found out that the Big Bang existed. Surprise! There was a beginning, just like the Bible suggested. Oh, and who discovered that? A priest, right? George Lemaitre. Okay, they mocked him. Even Einstein mocked him. But he was right. He was right. And they keep on seeking truth. And that is the essence of it. And you don't have any history in the Catholic Church where there's this conflict and that the science somehow disagreed with church doctrine. Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Lurie, you're wrong. What about the Galileo affair? Wait a minute, he's not talking right. Okay? All right. Bring him here to the Waldo house and he tells us stuff. All right. So I love it when people say the Galileo affair, right? As if it's supposed to have a whole lot of meaning. And I say, describe the Galileo affair. And they say, you know, the Galileo affair, the stuff that happened. So Galileo, he was a devout Christian. So was Copernicus before him. They were commissioned by the church to find their discoveries. There was no problem with the church, with Galileo or Copernicus claiming that the earth went around the sun and not vice versa, the heliocentric view of the solar system. They had no problem with that. They wanted to be accurate. At the time, they didn't know. In much the same way we didn't know about the theory of relativity until recently, it was a theory. And they wanted Galileo merely to present it as a debate. Well, he said, no, I'm right. And I wanted to present it my way. And not only that, but he also suggested changing the Bible. So the church didn't like that, and understandably so, right? If an employee at Apple said, you know, I don't like this new iPhone, I'm going to make a whole new one, right? I think Steve Jobs would have fired him, right? So similar idea. So this is, the contributions of Christianity and Judaism are so palpable. And I came away writing this book with such a great appreciation for all my Christian friends and for Christianity. And I feel like going up to them. And in fact, I do go up to them and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thanks, right? So it's a lot of fun, and they're, and one of the key things I would like for my Christian friends is defend yourselves. You know, be proud of who you are. Be proud of your faith, right? We Jews, I'm Jewish, by the way. We Jews are very good about defending our faith, all right? Both from a historical point of view and also our contributions to society. We're very bad at proselytizing. There's no prohibition against it, but we just don't do it. Christians are exactly the opposite. They're great at proselytizing, but they need to defend themselves. They need to show how great they are, okay? That's the difference.
Yep, absolutely. In the book, you say you're not going to talk much about belief versus non-belief, although there's a lot in there about it. It's more, and so there's not a judgment necessarily about believers versus non-believers. It really is the effect of belief versus the effect of rejection of belief, or rejection of God, or an embracing of godlessness, or whatever. So it's you're not arguing God exists. You're saying it's the belief in God that's led to all these great things. Right. And that's such an important distinction, I think, and makes it easier to have a conversation with people who might not necessarily believe.
Right.
Because
well, look, I mean, you know, I may not be Christian. Some of you may not be Jewish, right? But I still appreciate what Christianity has done. I mean, God help us if we didn't have Christianity in this world. Where would we be? It's not about my believing in the theology. That's almost not important. It's my appreciation for what Christianity has done. And it is a testament, I think, to maybe those Christians got something there, right? Likewise with Judaism, I think we've contributed a lot to the world. But I used to say, as an atheist, I'm an atheist, but thank God nobody else is, right? And I really meant it. I didn't understand that internal contradiction when I was an atheist, even though I knew that it was a dangerous philosophy, very dangerous. And for all the reasons I mentioned in the book, and you'll see soon enough. But Voltaire once said, if there were no God, it would be necessary to invent him. And he was right. He was right. I mean, he was not a very good Christian, I'll say that. But without God, anything is possible, and anything is dangerous. It's a horrific world. So we should be running to God, no matter where you are. Even if you have a conundrum with the notion of believing in God, find a way to associate with God, even if it's not fully in your heart yet. It'll come.
So about these slaughters, because I'm fascinated by all the horrors of history, the various slaughters, the Stalin, Hitler, and so on. Were they in the name of godlessness, or did they occur because God wasn't a bulwark against man's baser instincts.
Right. This is the guilt by association argument that I hear a lot from atheists. They'll be very upset with you when you say, you know, communism and fascism were both godless, and look at all the horrible stuff that happened. And they'll say, wait, that is guilt by association. And yet they have no problem doing that with you, right, when it comes to the Inquisition and the Crusades, you know. So, but nevertheless, they'll do that. The difference is we're right and they're wrong. Okay? And so, in the case of godlessness, in communism, fascism, they were the core of those principles. It would mean nothing without godlessness. It wasn't just an ideology that happened to be godless. It was front and center of both communism and fascism. Okay? Now, people will say, well, what do you mean? I thought that fascism was the extreme of the conservative mindset, and communism the extreme of the liberal mindset. So isn't that nice and packaged for everyone? That's the one I thought. But of course, it's not the case. Fascism and communism are really one and the same. Now, there is a difference, of course, but it's a little different. It's a little bit like the difference between an alligator and a crocodile. All I know is I don't want to be near either of them, right? So as you're being swallowed by the crocodile/alligator, like, I just want to know before you eat me, are you an alligator or a crocodile? So that's the main distinction between the two. But godlessness was at the core of both these philosophies.
What is that for?
Godlessness was at the core. Yeah.
When I was reading it, it sort of struck me that atheism versus belief, in a way, parallels the left-right paradigm of perfection versus imperfection. The left has the need for and a vision of utopia, and if something gets in the way of achieving it, it's evil. And in your discussion of atheists and atheism, there is also a desperate need for perfection, and if our vision of God doesn't meet perfection, therefore we have to reject him completely. Do you see that parallel at all? Do you see a parallel between atheism and leftism? Do you see perfection as playing a role in that way?
I mean, it's a much broader subject, but in a tight paragraph, if I could. Most atheists that I know are also on the left, politically left. It's not 100%. There are some conservative atheists. It's rare, but by and large, it's as ridiculous as saying finding a vegan, lawyer, Jewish conservative. What an absurd thing that would be. All right, I am one of those things. Okay, fine. So, but it's very rare, and there's a reason why atheism and leftism so go hand in hand, and it's exactly like Karen was mentioning, that there's a perfection that's expected. There's a utopia. And all utopias are the same in one sense. Either you get on board or you disappear. It's one or the other. Only with a God-based capitalist democracy can you really have many different voices share and live in harmony with each other. And we all say, you know what, you think your way, I think my way, this is what I want, we vote, all that stuff. I mean, think about how unique that is. No other system allows for that kind of give and take. But in Christianity and Judaism, we forgive. We understand that people are weak. We have checks and balances here. It ain't so anywhere else, in any other system of government. And so atheism, which hates the notion of God and hates the notion of anything that's outside of us, loves man instead. And man must be in charge. And when man must be in charge, it means you have to have a lot of rules. And man has vision. Man wants to impose his vision on you. That's the reason.
You take us through in the book this great thought experiment where you consider, okay, Mr. and Ms. Atheist, you've said you can't believe in God because the Holocaust happened. Let's remove that. What if God intervened and made sure that the Holocaust didn't happen? And then, okay, now what's next? Well, God can't exist because murders happened. Now God can't exist because this. So you just take us down to where your air conditioner doesn't work, I think was your example. Right. And now that's completely untenable. And once you remove layer after layer of a horrible thing, what are you left with? But your air conditioner doesn't work. And where can you go from there, right? So you're sort of left with nothing, but then your response is, it's actually every one of those problems. It's disease, it's hunger, it's various horrible things that have given birth to all the great things that we've done. Every invention, every creation, every discovery has been born out of the suffering or the pain or whatever.
Right, it's been in response to some sort of problem. I mean, air conditioning is a good example, right? The fact that we have wheels on cars so that we can move forward, and
Right.
the fact that we have email so that we can communicate. I mean, whatever, there's always a problem, and an innovation is there to address that problem. And God bless it. And if we don't want that, if we want to erase all obstacles in life, well, then what you're really looking for is a Garden of Eden.
Back to the garden.
Right? Which, ironically, the atheist doesn't believe in.
Right. You have a quote in here, the atheist doesn't see the relativity of what suffering is either, air conditioner and the Holocaust. He will never accept any world with God as its driving force because God can never make a world that's good enough for him, ever. For the atheist, something always will be unacceptably unpleasant, so God must deliver perfection, whatever that is. But civilization, as we think of it, is the result of imperfection. It's really extraordinary. In fact, virtually every invention anyone ever created is in response to a problem in need or in quest of greater convenience. Then you wrap it up with this. If you want a world that improves, you couldn't have fashioned a world any better. This is the world you would create if you had to start from scratch. The world the atheist claims to want would be a world without challenges or obstacles, and therefore without innovation and improvement. I thought that was just an extraordinary statement. It's an acceptance of reality. It's embracing of flaws, of evils, and saying, look at all the good that's come of this. And that wouldn't have come if we had the world that the atheists claim to want.
That's right.
I thought that was just a
Thank you.
remarkable,
Yeah.
remarkable thing. There's so much more in there. You talk about a desire to be famous, a need to matter, a need to have purpose. Without God, where does that come from? Right?
There is, the book is called Atheism Kills, of course, but it kills not just the body. It kills anything else that we value, right? If you value creativity, atheism is there to kill it, right? If you value beauty, atheism is there to kill it. Art, music, humor, right? I mean, it's the notion of innovation, of progress, the notion of time. Time, right? Think about this. This is something, we've all been to Europe, right? We've seen a famous church, right? We've all been to Notre Dame. Has anybody been here to the church in Toledo in Spain? It's beautiful, right? Yeah. Okay, here's a stunning church. And I go there as a Jew appreciating the beauty and the history behind this. And I'm learning about this, and the guide says this took about 1,000 years to build. Okay? So I'm just stopped dead in my tracks, and I'm thinking to myself, whoa, whoa, whoa. Think about what this means. The people who were starting this knew that they would never see the end of this. And then the same would be applied to the second generation, the third generation, and the 15th generation. I think they maybe 25, 30 generations before the end of the church would finally occur, and they would have a glorious ribbon cutting ceremony, right? So they had no idea. But why do they do this? Because they had faith in God. You don't have that. There is none of that sense if you have no God in your life, right? Try going to Santa Monica and saying, listen, I'd like to build a building. And the permit guy says, all right, how long do you think it'll be? 1,000 years? So they put their glasses down. Come again, right? So you'll say, yeah, it's just about 1,000 years, but it's really going to be nice. You're going to like it, right? And if you don't like it, you're a great. So, but of course, it's never going to happen that way. We don't live for that. We don't have that sense of the future as we used to. And we don't have a sense of the past. Look what's happening in the history classes today. We have a history teacher, Keith, here today, and he'll tell you, kids just don't know history. It's all gone. And they have no sense of the future. I always say about the left, and for that matter, more importantly, more poignantly about the godless, they have only a sense of about 3 seconds before them and 3 seconds ahead of them. They're in a bubble, literally, and they're going through this gelatinous substance of some kind. But all they know is what they see right here and right now. They have no idea about all the sweat, blood, and tears that it took to get here. All the faith of the Christians and the Jews, and just to get it right. The bravery of the men, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I and II, and even Vietnam. I mean, all the fixed bayonets and writing letters to their girlfriends, many of whom would never get it. Right? I mean, just think about that. But they fought for it because there was a sense of the future. And today, you ask students today, you know, when did America become an independent country? What year? They don't know. I mean, they'll guess. They know it's before the year 2017, 2018. But I've literally heard people say 1985, right? That's when I graduated from college, right? So, I mean, it's really remarkable. They just throw out these numbers. They have no clue. And that's not just about that. It's about the very notion of our government, what America stands for, that America is a racist nation, that all the terrible things that America supposedly is, it's better everywhere else. They think China is better. Right? It's a weird state of affairs. So there's a reason why we need God in our lives. God helps us with history and our sense of the future. It's just so important. We don't realize how atheism is killing us all, one way or the other. And this book is a clarion call against atheism. We must defeat it. We must speak about it openly and must attack it when people say that they're an atheist. You don't have to jump on them and start beating the crap out of them. I think Keith would want to do that. I'm kidding, just kidding. I'm really speaking about Evan Say It. He's the kind of guy that would do that. He would do it. Just don't bring an atheist next to Evan. But you do need to speak to them. When an atheist comes to you and says, "I'm an atheist," you know, proudly booms with his chest, you say, "Why? How's that working out for you?" I mean, he might as well be saying, "I'm a communist," or "I love Hitler." Really, he might as well say that. If somebody came up to you and said, "You know, I love what Hitler did," how would you respond? You would say, "That's outrageous. That's insulting. You are a stupid person." Right? Now, you don't have to say that directly, but you have to say that is a dangerous philosophy. Wherever atheism has been employed, horrific things happened. You want to be part of that team? Be my guest. But don't think that you're impressing me by saying that you don't believe in God. All you're telling me is that you don't want to be accountable for anything in your life. You don't want to see anything for the future of your generations, and you're a narcissist. Okay?
Yeah, it sums it up. Before I get to last questions, you talked about freedom and responsibility, which, of course, our freedom is on the shoulders of those who you cited, Revolutionary War and all of those. And you have this terrific quote, "Freedom is not the absence of dictatorship. Freedom is not what occurs when no one tells you what to do anymore. Freedom is active and requires constant nourishment and attention. Freedom is a beautiful but needy garden which only retains its beauty as long as many people continue to water it, weed it, and keep the overgrowth and rats and vermin at bay. Freedom is the right to think, the right to learn, the right to self-actualize. These are all active in nature." Of course, this struck me. We're American Freedom Alliance. I'm always looking for great statements about freedom, and I love that. How does that relate to God and godlessness?
Yeah. You can't have freedom without God. I mean, I set about demonstrating that in the book. It's a long chapter, but you just can't have it. But more importantly, why do you care about freedom without God? I'm going to give you two options, okay? I'm going to give you Conference Room A, if you like. In Conference Room A, you have all the food you want. You have all the women you want, all the men you want, whatever it is, whatever floats your boat, all right? You have all the university that you want. You have all the health care you want. You have the transportation that you want. And you'll have about 2 or 3 weeks of vacation, maybe even more, every year. okay? And you'll be guaranteed a certain pension by the end of the time. By the way, you don't have to work more than 30 hours a week. And all is good. Really, really good. Okay? And there's conference room B, where you are not promised any of those things. In fact, you've got to go get those things yourself or whatever it might be, but you could get something far greater. What that far greater thing is, I don't know, but I think it's pretty cool. You can discover God. You can learn about science. You can be the best that you can be. You can invent a new thing. You can teach a new way of thinking about education, whatever it might be. You can own a bunch of real estate. You could do tremendous things, but it's up to you. Most people choose conference room A. Most. If you ask a kid this, they will say conference room A. A high school student, college student, and beyond. They want comfort. And all you have to do is just do whatever the man tells you, whoever that man may be, right? And what I say is that in the battle between freedom and freebies, freebies always win. Okay? So, yes, freedom comes only from God, whether we realize it or not. There's no point to freedom otherwise. Animals don't have any sense of freedom. They don't. In fact, the animals prefer to be in the zoo. They do. I've asked them. No, okay. But no, intuitively, they do prefer it. I mean, why wouldn't they? You think they want to be in the jungle where they have to fend for their own food and be afraid of being eaten every day? I'll take the zoo cage, thank you very much. You know, where I get fed by some guy who comes into my cage. But that's the way it is. And people don't mind that. Many people think that way. It's terrifying.
It's mostly not us, I don't think.
Not this group.
No.
Yeah.
The subtitle is The Dangers of a World Without God, which we've talked about, and Cause for Hope.
Yes.
Can you talk about the cause for hope?
I wouldn't write this book unless I felt that there was hope. And there's a tremendous amount of hope. There is a great revival of Christianity in many places in the world, a great revival of Judaism too. Speaking on behalf of Judaism, if you were to ask most Jews in America even, what the state of Orthodox Judaism, which is generally speaking the mantle of Judaism, would be, because all the yeshivas, everyone knows what a yeshiva school is, right? It's a very religious school. They were closing down, and they were predicting by this time, late teens of the 21st century, that there would be only 3 yeshiva schools left in America. There would be Jews, but there'd be only 3 yeshiva schools left. As it turns out, there are thousands and thousands. Why? Because there's been this flurry of activity. There's been a rejection of the atheist culture of their parents, because kids do want a sense of something. They feel this a need for purpose. Mm-hmm. They're all Alex P. Keatons from Family Ties. You know, there's something about that nourishes them. In China, the Christian world is blossoming. It's the fastest growing religion in China. More so than you would think that they would run to Confucianism or Taoism or something like that, or Buddhism. It turns out they ain't interested in that. They like Christianity. They like it because it offers progress, it offers spirituality, it offers meaning to their lives. And boy, oh boy, it's great. And yet there's a lot of suppression of Christianity. And despite that suppression, it's growing. So I'm excited about that possibility. The one area where I have lost hope is Europe. It's not going to happen. It's a dead continent. Russia, oddly enough, may be the exception. Mm-hmm. Maybe. But we'll see. Let's cross fingers on that. But Europe is truly gone. There's no way that it can fight back. It's the point of no return. The radical Muslims, they have a passion. It's an evil passion, but they have a passion. And the Europeans, why would they fight back? They have no idea what they would be fighting for. I mean, if you tell a young 22-year-old kid, go fight those guys. And the French kid will say, why should I? For what? For the baguettes? They have no idea who they are. They're certainly not fighting for God. All the churches are closed. All of them. There's the Netherlands, one church in the Netherlands, they are a little bit innovative. So they converted it to an indoor skating park, right? And so one of the kids who was enjoying it said, "Wow, this is a gift from God." So I guess we reached him at the very least. But the point is, that's how bad it is, and these are becoming museum pieces. But mark my words, by the year 2030, Notre Dame will become a mosque. Okay? Okay? And other churches like it. And now before you say, "That's ridiculous, Mr. Lurie, you seem like a nice guy, I like your suit." But I gotta tell you, that's kind of wacky. But is it? No, it's the highest and best use. And they're already doing it, by the way. And I mean, there are stages. They'll go and they'll pray next to the church, right outside the church. And what are the gendarmes going to do, right? What are the police going to do? "You must move along, yes?" No, why? Why? They're not hurting anybody. And the police don't give a crap anyway. Okay, my daughter's looking at me like, "You just swore, Daddy." It's an okay word, sweetie. So, but they don't give a crap. And so they'll eventually get into the vestibule, and then eventually they'll say, "Look, no one's here. What do you care? We're using this church. We're making use of it, and you're not." It'll be the easiest thing to happen. So Europe is gone, but there's a lot of hope elsewhere. I'm seeing a tremendous amount of growth of Judaism, and Orthodox Judaism in particular, in Israel and in America. So this is good stuff happening. Australia is growing a little bit too in Christianity. China, like I mentioned. Vietnam, oddly enough. Right? So there is great cause for hope. I think people have a yearning for God. They have a God impulse. And if they go with it, great things can happen.
There is a yearning, and there is a yearning to make meaning. We're meaning makers. We can't help it. We need a purpose. You tell the story. It would be great if you could repeat it. A bunch of you went to the movies and you left. Some of you felt it made absolutely no sense, and others of you argue this was the best movie ever, the artistic whatever.
Oh, right.
But it turns out the reels had been mixed up.
Right.
Right? But still, we have a need to somehow find a way to have it have made sense.
Right. That's right. We look for meaning in everything.
For meaning.
It was the strangest thing. I mean, I knew, I was in the camp and said this movie was horrible, right? It made no sense to me. I mean, it seemed to go backwards in time, forwards in time, and big gaps in it. And there were people that were saying this was a masterpiece, just awesome.
It's such a different
right?
vision. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's true in art, isn't it? I mean, look, think of art. Art is the greatest example of what we talk about, and it's so emblematic. Modern art in particular. Okay, I know that there are a lot of aficionados of modern art here, perhaps, I don't know. But most of you are shaking your head. You are not aficionados. Okay. You want me to speak up? Okay. That was God speaking to me right now. Anyway, so he said, so you go into these modern art museums and they're about nothing, right? I mean, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, whatever they call it, there's a LACMA. There's a huge rock there. What do you want from me? You just say, what is this, right? I mean, I took my daughter to the Louvre in Paris. That's majestic. I mean, you just resent it that there's so much great classic work there. You want to study every picture, every painting for 2 hours. And there's just too much stuff. It's so beautiful. Right, Sasha? We had a great time there, right? It was just exquisite. And every one of these paintings is in some way connected to God. You know, let me find a way toward God. It's either a biblical reference or a historical reference, but even so, commemorating something that was significant from a godly point of view. And so it should be in everything we do. It should be godly, right? This is the cornerstone of a thesis of the book. God must be central in all of our lives. When we wake up, when we brush our teeth, when we eat, when we sleep, when we hug, when we're intimate for that matter, everything that we do, we have to thank God in some way, or at least recognize that God is part of this equation. We're here for a reason. God has put us here for a reason. And when we pull away from that, we do damage to the world. So the little how are yous, the littles, can I help you out today? Can I hold the door for you? How was your weekend? These little things, the pleases, the thank yous. You are opening the door to God. in a way that you just can't have if you don't embrace those things. These are the steps we can take. Modern art, it's evidence of the decay of culture.
Well, right, and the one at the Louvre and elsewhere elevates, and you feel your spirit soar, where everything, I'll at least say from the left, but I imagine atheism too, the modern art, is to debase.
Yes.
A rock, are we no better than rocks? I mean, what do you want from me? Is that what you're telling me?
Right.
That meaninglessness, it really is about meaninglessness. And you can tell in people's eyes if they have purpose, meaning, a desire to improve themselves or not.
Right.
And that comes from God, from the belief in God, whether or not it's God. I was going to ask one last question. You sort of, well, there's thousands of things, but I want to get to everybody else's questions. Well, let me say this. In a lot of what I do, I find that there's somehow an assumption that things that we've held to be important are being transmitted to our kids. That somehow the importance of reading or learning or good manners or whatever is being, of history is being, we sort of have this imagined idea that it is, including religion. And it's really not. In fact, it's the opposite. All those things are being undermined. So that's sort of part of my question is, what can we do to keep the idea and ideals of all of this, of a world with God, alive?
The easy answer to that, and I think the only answer to that, is to proudly boast of your belief in God. Proudly boast and talk about how God is part of your lives. When I leave the elevator to my office every day, I say to everyone who is there, have a great one, God bless. Okay? Be that person. And people remember that. And they say, you know what, I feel good for some reason. They connect with you. They like you for that. You're an ambassador for God every time you speak about God. Just like those Christian friends of mine were at Stanford. They were great ambassadors. I'll never be a Christian, but I admired these people. I began to think really well of Christians. They were great ambassadors. Please do the same. And likewise for your kids. Always talk about God to your kids and how wonderful God is. Kids love God.
Well, thank you.